Oh, good. It's on. Welcome back to DepDiv Podcast, the podcast where a German Shepherd explains the world better than your cable news anchor, your college professor, and your uncle who definitely has opinions after 2 beers. I'm Maple. I have 4 legs, a magnificent coat, and absolutely zero patience for nonsense. Today's episode is brought to you by the ancient human tradition of making terrible decisions and then calling them culture. Cozy up, this one's spicy. So, China, one-child policy. Baby girls. Let's talk about the intersection of communist central planning and prehistoric gender bias, a combo so chaotic it would make even me bury it in the backyard. Here's the short version. For decades, China told families 1 kid only. And families, steeped in centuries of boys carry the family name tradition, looked at their newborn daughters and said, hard pass. Girls were abandoned, left at orphanages, train stations, roadsides. Because nothing says civilized society like treating your infant like an expired coupon. Let's be real. The one-child policy, launched in 1980, collided headfirst with Confucian patrilineal culture like 2 trucks on a fog-covered highway. Sons were retirement plans, daughters were liabilities. The math, as the Chinese Communist Party loves math, was brutal. You know, treating children as a literal ledger asset isn't exactly a modern invention. The ancient Chinese philosopher Han Fizi actually wrote about this barbaric cost-benefit analysis centuries ago. To him, raising a son was a profitable asset, and a daughter, a direct financial loss. Fast forward a couple of millennia, and a 19th century American missionary named Arthur Smith was documenting just how widespread infanticide still was in rural China. This is a brutal math that spans centuries, folks. It's deeply ingrained. The result? An estimated tens of thousands of baby girls abandoned annually during peak policy years. Orphanages across China, particularly in rural provinces, were quietly, systematically overflowing with little girls who had the audacity to be born female. And then, modern ultrasound technology entered the chat. Families could suddenly check the gender before birth. This amplified the bias and led to a horrifying statistic. Up to 120 boys were born for every 100 girls. The enforcement was just as terrifying. As recently as 2012, a mother in Shaanxi province who couldn't pay a 40,000 RMB fine was forced to abort her 7-month-old fetus. Ultimately, this massive social engineering experiment left China with a staggering surplus of over 30 million men. Now, the CCP will tell you this was all very unfortunate and unintended. Sure, and I'm a Labrador. Enter international adoption. Starting in the early 1990s, China opened its doors to foreign families, particularly American ones, who wanted children and couldn't have them biologically. The math flipped. Suddenly, these unwanted girls were being raised in Ohio, Texas, California. They were getting educations, opportunities, futures their birth country literally discarded them for being female to receive. The sheer absurdity of the state deeming these kids worthless becomes pretty obvious when you look at how they turned out. A girl discarded from Suzhou. She went on to graduate from the elite U.S. Naval Academy. A girl from Jiangxi, that's Maggie McNeil, who won an Olympic gold medal in swimming for Canada. And from Guangxi came Morgan Hurd, a world champion gymnast for the United States. These phenomenal achievements completely shattered the ledger that labeled them as useless. I mean, come on. By 2005, China was the top sending country for international adoptions to the United States. Hundreds of thousands of girls found families abroad. Is that a happy ending? Mostly. Is it also a damning indictment of a system that created the crisis in the first place? Absolutely. Enthusiastically, with a bow on top. And here's where I get philosophical, which, yes, dogs can do that. The same state that told families fewer children also enforced the very gender norms that made daughters unwanted. The CCP didn't just engineer a demographic crisis, it engineered a moral one. Children became state assets to be counted, controlled, and discarded when the numbers didn't work out. But it gets darker. Let's look at what was happening locally. Between 2002 and 2005, local family planning officials realized something utterly twisted. Those abandoned babies, they were actually highly profitable commodities. Here's the horrifying clinical math of this black market supply chain. Step 1. In Shaoyang, officials would literally kidnap babies, sometimes legally born ones, when parents couldn't pay massive extortion ransoms.
Step 2. They forged the paperwork, classifying these stolen kids as abandoned orphans. Step 3. They sold them into local orphanages, packeting 1,000 RMB reward per child. And Step 4. The orphanages then generated huge revenue from the $3,000 foreign adoption donations. The local government essentially built an export industry out of human infants. The girls who were adopted internationally didn't escape a natural disaster. They escaped a man-made one. Policy plus prejudice plus power equals a generation of children treated as problems to be solved rather than people to be loved. And for the record, I, Maple, a female German Shepherd, would like to officially note that females are in fact excellent. I am living proof.
To really grasp this, we have to contrast the state's cold, brutal financial ledgers with actual human reality. There's a striking story about the adoptive mother of world champion gymnast Morgan Hurd. She was once stopped in a grocery store by a stranger who actually had the audacity to ask how much she paid for her daughter. Her answer was a single word: priceless. You see, that one word is the dividing line. Calculating a child's monetary value, treating human life as a ledger asset, that is barbarism. Looking at a child, regardless of gender, and declaring them priceless, that is civilization. The philosopher Walter Benjamin once said, "There is no document of civilization which is not at the same time a document of barbarism." The entire history of the one-child policy and the international adoptions that followed perfectly capture this tension. A society can only claim to be civilized when it recognizes its barbaric traditions and chooses to toss them out. Otherwise, you're just slapping a new coat of paint over the same old cruelty. Okay, real talk. If you're learning things and being mildly horrified and occasionally laughing, that means Barkin Brains is working. The least you can do is subscribe. It's free. It takes 4 seconds. I've seen you spend longer sniffing your phone doing absolutely nothing. Don't pretend otherwise.
Leave a review, tell your friends, post about us. My producer needs the metrics to justify my kibble budget, and I refuse to compromise on grain-free. Subscribe now. Consider my tail wagged.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. If this made you think, great. If it made you angry, even better. That means something landed. A massive 4-pod thank you to my brilliant producer, FireflyHaku, who, much like the international adoption system, takes something chaotic and discarded and turns it into something the world actually wants to hear. Couldn't do it without you, Haku. You're the forever family to my stray ideas. And to you, my loyal listeners, thank you for lending me your ears. You can't help it, really. I'm a dog. We're irresistible. Until next time, stay curious, stay sarcastic, and for the love of kibble, value your daughters. Because if a culture's vitality relies on how it treats its most vulnerable, what does our ledger look like today?